Yeah, so my name is John Collier, and I currently have a consultancy business. I work quite a lot with the local enterprise offices in particular in different parts of the country. So I am a mentor and I do specific programs with 13 different LEOs in different parts of the country. I also do work with Enterprise Ireland, with the IDA a little bit, and with Intertrade Ireland. And most of the work is with SMEs and micro SMEs, helping them develop their products, their services, getting those products into retail stores if they're a consumer product, and also helping them export outside of Ireland. Um, a large part as well is around networking. So it's helping them build networks both in Ireland and outside of Ireland that they can then promote their products and services to.
Very impressive, John. And I know you've been very successful. You've also been very busy. Why did you even consider joining the PG Dip, John?
I think at the time I saw it, and I've worked in innovation all of my career basically, been particularly in food innovation and in a little bit in service design. And I've never had a formal qualification in innovation or design thinking in particular. I read quite a lot around design thinking, so Jean Litka and those type of practitioners out there, I absolutely love what they do. And when you talk to people, and particularly when you tender for work from Enterprise Ireland or from the local enterprise office system, it's just looked better on your CV if you have that formal qualification. No matter what experience you have, they still like to see that there on paper. So I applied for that reason, and I kind of approached it initially going, sure, I'll know all of this anyway, but it's just to get that qualification. And I think that attitude changed definitely throughout the program.
Yeah, cool. And we'll hear maybe a bit more about that short. John, and I need to sort of recognize as well, you received award for your project on this program. Can you tell us a bit about what the project was about?
Yeah, so it was an interesting project. So I'll give a little bit of a preamble first, Paddy, if that's okay. But late last year, I worked in a contract with Wexford Local Enterprise Office, and it was really to try and understand why their clients, the small micro SMEs within Wexford, why they weren't exporting. So I did a large body of work from July until December with them. And it raised a lot of interesting questions because like a very high percentage of companies actually wanted to export, but yet only 25% of them were doing it. So I really saw there was an opportunity there to help these companies to develop an export strategy. But from working also with Enterprise Ireland, I've also realized that their system, while it works really well for larger companies, it doesn't work for the one or two or up to 10 people companies that are currently out there. So I wanted to understand what the specific issues were that stopped them from exporting, and then develop a service around that to actually get them out and abroad as quickly as possible.
And can you tell us a little bit about that service that you were designing as part of this program, John?
Yeah, so what I've done is I'm halfway through branding it at the moment. So this is a live project for me. It's something I am implementing, but I'm calling it the export shop. So it's basically where we initially assess the companies across 11 different competencies required for export. So typically what you will find is you'll find export readiness assessment tools out there online, and they will look at strategy, they will look at finance, they will look at staff. Those three in particular aren't overly suitable for the smaller company. So we have developed our own export preparedness assessment tool based on the 11 competencies. Then, depending on how they score on each of those, we will then develop a program specific for them. So it's a large bespoke element. It might involve applying for grants to actually help them to fund parts of that export journey. It'll be around helping them develop networks in the local market that they're looking at, help them understand the market and sort of trawling through the papers and journals and things like that to try and quantify and understand where that market is. And for a large part of the small micro SME cohort, most of their export in reality will be through e-commerce. So it's about understanding what you need to have on your website, the structures, international SEO, geo-targeting, language targeting, all of those elements. So our aim is to bring a company from the beginning to be exporting within 3 to 6 months, depending on the number of competencies that they need to improve on. What we also do, that's probably a little bit different, and from my feedback is that these micro SMEs don't have large bank accounts with money readily available. So we've actually developed a subscription-based model. So rather than having to pay us a lump sum or 50% of a lump sum up front, we work with them, and over the 3 to 6 months, we will divide it over that time period. So it allows them to actually, it's more affordable for them to do it that way.
And like we've sort of design thinking and action design research as core elements of this program, John. What difference and why did you need those to end up with what you ended up with?
That's a really interesting question, Paddy, but I think I'm a scientist. I've a PhD in agri-foods. I've worked in science or food science most of my career. So I'm very analytical in how I approach things. And if I was looking at this, and when I look back at other businesses that I've done before this, I spend too much time on the analysis before I do anything. So what ADR and design thinking has taught me through this program is actually get that first artifact, get it out there as quickly as you can, and get feedback on that. Because one of the biggest things I've learned here is by doing that, I'm actually making it more concrete in the end user's mind what I'm trying to do, so that they can then give really valuable feedback. And it just shortens, it actually makes that process a lot more lean in the end run. So that would have been the big thing. ADR also interests me because of my analytical mind. So it's a nice mix between pure design thinking and action. So it allows you to do that element of research, but you just need to remember that research has to be done concurrently with the design element, that they're not two separate things that you do at separate time periods.
And I really like, John, to know, I love the way you told that story, but also the fact that in your own project, you could see how you brought your stakeholders nearly as a core part of the iterative design of your service, as opposed to being something out there that you're designing for. So I think that was really noteworthy as well, John. John, what sort of difference is this going to make, maybe to yourself, but also to those stakeholders, those micro SMEs you're talking about?
Okay, well, to myself, when I started this project, I was looking at it purely from their perspective. Okay, so I was developing a service, and in my head, because I always plan as far in advance as I can, I was thinking of a number of infographics and things like that I could get out there to help these companies. But as I progressed through it then, and it was thanks to you actually in one of our first mentoring sessions, it made me realize, actually, I need to get something out of this as well. So for me, what I'm getting out of this is it's giving me more structure in how I recruit companies, how I manage them through the process, how I capture the KPIs and returns for those companies at the end. It gives me, or it gave me a really good structure to actually go out and talk to the local enterprise offices about what I want to try and do as well. And thankfully, everyone I've spoken to so far has bought into that idea. So much so that would say Wexford, for example, are investing a significant amount of money to actually run a trial of this within the Wexford area. And I'm discussing that with other local enterprise offices as well at the moment. For the client, a lot of them don't have the skills in-house. It might be 1, 2, 3 people working in a company, generally part of the one family unit, and you'll have a father or a mother there as the head of this company, and they drive everything, and they're run ragged working. So first of all, it allows them to bring someone in for a period of time to actually work with them solely on that export element. And that's something that currently they just don't have the time for to do themselves. It also then, it teaches them. So by working with them, it helps them build their capability so that the next export project then, hopefully they won't need as much of my help from that. So that's the big thing, I think, for those client companies. It sort of gives them a resource that they can use, and then it builds that capability within their organization.
Yeah, and I think it's a point very well made, John. As design researchers, as designers, we do need to make decisions where we're trying to provide value to a number of stakeholders, you know, and in some cases that is to you, your own business, you know, which I think is a point really well made, John. John, you know, there might be people watching this that are considering following a similar journey to you onto this program. What sort of advice, good, bad, or indifferent, would you give them?
I would say to them, just make sure that it is something that you want to do, because, and particularly if you're working full time. So there's so much work involved in this program. It's almost at a master's level in terms of the level of involvement involved in it. So make sure that you want to commit to that. Now, it is something 100% you can do while working, and the vast majority of my cohort and the previous were working. So it is something that you can do, but just make sure that you want to commit to it and get something out of it at the end of the day. I would also sort of advise that when it comes to that second term project, just make sure it's something that means something to you. Make sure it's either something you can use to progress you in your work environment, or if it is a social enterprise type project or something like that, that it's something that you're very passionate about, because that you need that motivation to keep you going through the project. And you also need that because you'll want to learn about that a little bit more. You really want to try and address that issue for someone, and you need that ambition to get through this project. But if I was back at this stage again last year, I would sign up for this again, because I've learned so much, particularly on the design side, because I was very analytical. So learning around the design elements was something new to me. And I learned that design thinking isn't a process. It is a thinking. And the more practice you have at that, the more accurate that thinking will get over time.
And I think it's a very well made point as well, John. You know, as part of this program, we're not really looking at these academic type projects that you just do for the sake of an academic award. We're actually encouraging people to bring problems from their environments, whether that's their organization, their communities, into the room, and we work on them together so that values deliver back to those communities, back to those organizations, but also to yourself. So I think your idea, John, that find something that's meaningful to you or is even a passion project, it's so well made, you know, and it's something we focus a lot on, is trying to find those projects.
The other thing I would add, and this is probably the most important thing for me, is engage with the other people on the course with you. And don't be afraid to be vulnerable in front of them, because everyone is vulnerable, believe me. No matter how experienced you are, there's elements of the course that will make you feel a little bit more vulnerable. But I've learned probably more And no offense to the lecturing team, but I probably have learned more from sort of throwing ideas out there with my colleagues, be it in term one on the team in that, or in general in the second term, than I have from the actual lecture notes. And I love that in terms of education, because I've gained so many contacts that I hope I'll keep for life. And hopefully they feel the same about me, that they can pick up a phone or a WhatsApp or whatever. And if they have any questions, I'll try to help them in any way I can.
Yeah, and I know that's shared, John, because I've been talking to a lot of our cohort that are just finishing, and they also refer to that network, that group, being able to pick up the phone or whatever else to one another. And I know you've been very proactive as well, John, in encouraging that within this group, and I'd like to thank you for that as well. John, thanks a million for giving us the time. It's a bit longer than maybe we expected, but when you get you and me together, the time goes out the window very, very often. John, will be staying in touch. We'll definitely be hopefully drawing on your expertise again for the cohort coming in.
Yeah,
so
call me back on stage, Paudie. I've no issues with helping you in any way I can.
Cool.
And thank you for an enjoyable experience.